So, very good evening to all of you who are present here today. I'll try to do justice to the text. Brinda Ma'am, of course, is a great reader, and we all admire her reading skills, but um she is not available today, so she asked me to just, okay, fill in for her. So, pretty big shoes for me to fill. So I request all of you to be with me on this occasion today and just support me. And
Certainly, ma'am, we'll be doing this. And could you please introduce yourself for everyone if like somebody is not aware, so they'll
yeah,
be.
sure. So for everyone, I'm Pushpita Ghosh. I'm a teacher at Gyanshri School, and I'm also the GSA coordinator for the school. So Brinda ma'am and we have been, regularly uh, being a part of this reading session that Vrinda ma'am has very enthusiastically. She's very enthusiastic about reading and about promoting reading. So we have been reading for quite some time with ma'am in school as well. And it was really a pleasure also to be a part of this group. So today, for this evening, I'm just taking over because ma'am is not available today. I guess we'll be starting with this particular page. I hope it is visible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
So, is the screen visible for everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Pushpita, ma'am, is the screen visible to you?
Ma'am, the screen is visible to me, but the font is a little small. So, is it okay if
Ma'am,
I
you have to enlarge it from your phone side. Let me check if I can do it for you. Is it better?
Yeah, this is much better.
Okay. So, over to you, ma'am, for your.
Okay. Welcome and good evening, everyone. We'll start with the reading session and we will continue the journey that we have begun together. So, today we will start from this point which has been bookmarked for us, he for she. There was a lesson I needed to learn, and I learnt it when I met Kamlesh, but it took me a while. Kamlesh's father was a public school teacher, but he wasn't all that taken by the idea of a government job himself. Kamlesh liked to meet lots of people and travel, and he wanted to get out of the village for work. Much to the chagrin of his father, he took up work as a taxi driver. Now there are taxi drivers and there are taxi drivers. And when I met him, I could see that Kamlesh was one of the confident, outgoing characters who would engage with his passengers and always have a story to tell or an inquiry to make. He is an imposing man with a bright twinkle in his eye. His well groomed beard told me that he took pride in his appearance and his culture. A bear like figure that could either intimidate you or make you feel safe and protected. Kamlesh first met us when he accompanied his wife to a recruitment event. I think we read this part last time, ma'am, isn't it? If anyone else was here last session, should I continue? Manisha, ma'am?
Ma'am, this is the bookmark I have received, so that is how I have put up this page.
Fine, fine. We'll continue. Joining Educate Girls wasn't an obvious choice for him, but when his wife started volunteering, Kamlesh was intrigued and deeply moved by her engagement and success in enrolling girls in his village school. Over the course of a year, Kamlesh saw how every day she would meet with families, teachers, and village leaders. He saw how she journeyed to the furthest hamlets of the village to seek out girls and persuade their families to send them to school. And occasionally he joined her for a particularly challenging conversation. Kamlesh, unlike his wife, was not the obvious candidate, and so our team did indeed take over a year to be convinced to give him a chance. But when they did, they saw an opportunity. 2 years on, and the stones were still being thrown by Ram in the village where Vikram first got hit, and the villagers were still brewing their own liquor. It was still held back by a generation of men who couldn't find work, who took solace in alcohol, kept their girls at home, and sent their wives out to earn a daily wage or sit in the neighboring market with some meager produce from their tiny strips of land. It was a near impossible cluster of villages and was far from the main highway 32 that took you up and over the Aravalli hills in the direction of Jodhpur. There was very little support from the teacher there, and the school remained half empty. She had enough to do to try and engage the children in their classes. The numbers had dropped in her school, funding from the government had reduced, and she didn't have the money to mend the stinking toilet nor to get the water pump pumping. I enrolled 10 girls in my first 4 months, Kamlesh told me proudly. I'm a taxi driver. Uh, I'm used to conversations. I can be very persuasive, and I don't take no for an answer, and a drunken passenger doesn't worry me. Having seen his wife at work in their village and heard her stories of negotiations and tactics, he was able to deploy some of the same, mixed with his own passion and belief that every girl had the right to go to school, and it was for the benefit of the whole village as well as each family. He used the fact that his father was a government teacher to build credibility and also speak from experience about how important education is. But he also used his talent with inebriated passengers to engage with Ram and others like him in the village who struggled with alcohol addiction and had pushed themselves and their families deep into the margins. A father to father chat is what often clinches the deal. Working behind the scenes in the village to get the male headmaster and the male Gram Panchayat leadership on their side is also a tactic where a man to man interaction can work. The surprise in some communities of seeing a man working for the girls is enough to provoke change. Gender equality is powerful with men as part of the solution. Quite often, the most powerful advocate is someone who has also made a profound change themselves. Former smokers are often the most vociferous anti smoking campaigners. There is nothing more powerful than a father explaining to a fellow neighbor why he was persuaded by educated girls to enroll his daughters in school. And that brings me back to Ram. It was grief that had brought Ram's life to a halt. Before his wife died, he was a successful farmer and an educated man. His wife had also studied and worked. His girls had actually been to school before, but once their mother died, he had pulled them out. With no income, Ram even had to resort to selling items from the house. Kamlesh remembered one time asking why they were building a fire from wood, and Pooja replied that her father had sold the gas canister to pay for liquor. But as he got to know Ram, he realized there was a potential here. Pooja pleaded with her father to send her and her sisters to school. Kamlesh could see Ram was intelligent and likely, with his story, a powerful influencer. Through leaning into Ram's memories of his wife, Kamlesh managed to reignite aspiration in Ram. Ram is now one of the most tenacious team Balika we have. And he is now back to his farming. He became our gateway to the village, our ears, our eyes, our heart, and our action. Kamlesh and he were the reason that most of the children in the village were now going to school. And they both were the reason that I managed to change my own mindset and challenge my biases. Having thrown stones in our path, eventually Ram us, joined us on our path and saw how powerful an education could be for his girls. This story showed me just how much stronger we are when we work together. I went into this work with strong feminist ideals and a bias that only a woman could truly champion girls' education from her own position and lived experience. How wrong I was, and how clearly I saw that in Ram. Kamlesh, Asif, Sanjay, and countless others who have joined our team that we had passionate male advocates for girls who spoke a whole different language and told different stories to shift mindsets as they shifted my own. It took me a while, but I got there in the end, and we now had a really clear idea of who we were looking for to engage with communities. We thought it was just the elders, but we found people, young and old, who joined our team. We learned not to judge by appearances, but truly listen to the inhabitants of each and every village, and we finally overcame my rigidity around working with women alone. We found a great many men, old and young, with the drive and influence to fight for girls' education. The team was coming together. As we grew, we also gathered more and more stories, honing our messages and becoming more and more authentic as the story married the storyteller. We had hired Meena, Vikram, Ramlal, and Vijay Lakshmi, and others were joining us as our work spread from village to village. But something still wasn't quite right. A voice in my head kept asking me, how do we know we are finding every girl? How do we know that we haven't missed anyone? And this takes me right back to the very beginning of the Educate Girls story and how we decided where to start and how to find every last girl. Okay, we begin a new chapter, Lessons in How to Count Girls. Okay. I wisely started with a map, J.R. Tolkien. Okay. As the team came together, we realized we needed to know where to look. Yes, Manisha ma'am?
Could you please explain something about the chapter which you just read, like the little of it?
So, initially, the narrator, she had certain reservations and she thought that only ladies would be, appropriate candidates who would be able to champion the cause of girls education. But when she came across certain characters like Ram and Kamlesh, she understood that she had been mistaken, and actually, men could also come forward, and because they were so convincing and they had their own stories to tell, they also could convince other fathers in the village to send their girls to school. So that was one of the main highlights of the last chapter that we just read. That the narrator herself, she confesses that she had been wrong, and this realization or this self awareness is something that she tells us about in the last chapter. That she realized that even men could come forward and they actually were great team members and team players who were able to convince a lot of fathers in the villages to and helped to get a lot of the girls in the villages enrolled as well in schools. So any opinions any of you all want to share, or any stories that you have, or
Yeah,
any
I just
observations?
wanted to say that a few years back, I was just thinking that, okay, this is the 21st century, 21st century. And now, in a blink of the time, a quarter of the century is also taken up. So, if you see 26, even now, I feel that the parents are still not sending their children, like the girl child, to school. And there are many things which is they are not receiving, whereas the boy in the family is taking advantage of. So why do you
Absolutely.
think it is actually happening? What is your opinion to this? Why
um,
a girl is never asked to enjoy everything and whatever is coming at home is being told for the boy child to enjoy that, to eat, or maybe the best of everything in the world is being given to the boy child and not to the girls. Even now in many families, if you see,
hmm,
the when we talk about property and everything, it's like only the boys are going to take care and not the girl.
Absolutely, ma'am.
What is
And
your
that's
opinion?
still, I think, the mentality that needs to change, because in many Indian households, not only in Indian households, even I would say the world over, there are still some pockets where they traditionally believe that, that the male child is superior. And especially in households like the very poorer households, the poverty stricken people, they think that the meager resources that they have, it is better invested if they, teach their boys and they educate their boys, because after all they are the future of the family and will look after the family. The girls after all will get married and go to a different family. So that is probably one of the reasons that even today in the poorer sections of society we have this mindset that if they have any money to spare, they would rather invest it in their male child rather than in the girls. But in this, that they probably, they only think of the present situation, and they think that the girls can help out with the household chores, or they can be employed in domestic work and they can earn some extra income for the family. But they don't take into consideration the larger picture, that if the girls are educated, they can also contribute in the future and they can have a much brighter future, so and stand up for themselves and for their family. So this probably is one of the reasons I feel. And because India, still we have so many people living under the poverty line, that is one of the main considerations, that they think that the male child is the future of the family and the protector of the family, the provider of the family. So that is probably, I think that is one of the reasons.
Certainly, ma'am. Pushpendra, what is your opinion to this?
Yes, let's have a male perspective as well.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, what is my opinion about it is not a generation mind. It is not a generation mindset. It is a lineage mindset.
Hmm.
Because I think it is a history context comes in. Because India have faced, the northern India have faced so much of invasions. So protecting the women of the family, because women are treated in Rajasthan and other states in the northern part as the pride of family. To protect them, they start living at the home. They don't go out. Just for example, it's marriages are happening in nights with the fairas and all, which used to be in the morning. Because of invasion, the timings got changed. This is a historical context, what I understand, because what is the plot of the story? I live in that place.
Okay.
And what people thinks about it, when someone, what, it's not my perspective, what people thinks. It's that when a woman gets education and gets successful, and that's totally fine for them. But when she broadens her horizon and do a intercaste or inter-religion marriage, they think that because there is an orthodox mindset in them, they think that they are ruining social cultures of society. Sometimes they see someone like that and stops their girl education child. This is what I think because what I see in my localities.
Certainly,
Okay.
Pushpendra. Thank you for sharing. And Rohini, ma'am, what is your opinion? Could you please share? Rohini Agarwal. I believe there is a problem with the mic. No problem. Over to you, ma'am. We can
Okay,
read
so
the
we'll
chapter.
continue with the reading. Yes.
Yes, yes, certainly.
As the team came together, we realized we needed to know where to look and how to find every out of school girl in every village. Where should we look? At first, we thought the answer was easy. Each school had a list of out of school girls. And once we had a partnership with the government, they were happy to share it so we could mobilize families and bring those girls back into school. We needed a plan and a system, but something nagged at us. Did those lists share the full picture? Were we really finding every last girl? Counting girls. Arey wah, he trumpeted, waving a hand in the air to signal success and draw everyone's attention to him. In his other hand, he held a steaming hot glass of chai by its rim. This was a celebration toast. We have enrolled 18 girls, every girl on the list. Bhakti, Parvati, Lakshmi, Pinky, he reeled off names, proud that he knew them all. Every girl on his list was important. Previously out of school and now gracing his classroom every day, he was a happy man. All the girls were now going to school. The mood was quite jubilant. Just 4 months ago, Mr. Shankar had presented us with a list of out of school girls in his village. He was the head teacher and had been grateful for our support. The atmosphere at the school was one of pride and satisfaction. I might even dare to say we were all a little smug. 100% enrollment. We had done it. Having spent the first couple of hours of the day singing and dancing with the classes, we then sat with the girls to see how they were getting on. Some girls were still incredibly shy and found it hard to articulate what they thought about being students rather than working in the fields. For them, the change had been so enormous. But others had a newfound confidence that radiated from them as they showed us what they had learned. They told us stories of reading to their grandmothers, often still balancing chores at home. But they were clearly happy, very happy, that they were now going to school. Even Bharti, a slight little girl I had met a few months before, whose parents had been very inflexible about the idea of school, had made enormous progress and showed me how she could write her name in both Devanagari and the alphabet. We patted ourselves on the back. Leaving the school, Vikram, Meena, and I scoured the village and decided upon a shaded well beside a pond not far from the water pump to sit and open up our dabbas. Manju ji from our guest house had packed a delicious lunch of roti, sabzi, and achar, and we passed each individual steel pot around, sharing the vegetables and dal, digging in with our fingers and relishing each mouthful. In the distance, we could hear the school bell go and the children pour out of the classrooms into the courtyard, their playful voices all merged into that sound that we all know as the playground sound, a sound that cannot be mistaken for anything else. Chatter and the odd, delirious scream usually associated with a win, whether it be kabaddi or kho, tag or cricket. But just as we were easing into our feeling that in this village our job was done, four girls rounded the corner and approached the well. All four were barefoot, each carrying a shiny steel urn. The smallest could not have been more than 6 years old. The other three looked to me like they were around 8 or 9. School was still in full flow, albeit it being recession. There was still another few hours in the classroom before the children went home. Why were these girls not in school? I don't think any of us wanted to ask the question at first, as if we were still too focused on our celebrations, convinced we had enrolled everyone on our list, every last girl in the village. Perhaps they were just absent that day. Enrolled girls do tend to have to miss some school sometimes, so we carried on eating, but this time in silence. The unease was kicking in as we watched the girls, with their sinewy arms, heave on the water pump and then hoist the urns up and onto their heads. No doubt all of us were thinking the same thing. We avoided eye contact. Then another couple of girls approached the well, and then another. As we sat there, in the space of an hour, while eating our lunch, over 9 girls came to fill water. When the 10th little girl approached the well, we decided to speak to her. We asked her where she lived, and she gestured far across the valley behind a small temple whose tiny orange flag we could just see poking out above a clump of trees. We asked her if she went to school. No, was her simple answer, as she shook her head, unable to look me in the eye. We asked her if she was enrolled in the school. She said no. And after a while, after sitting with her for 20 minutes or so, we learned that there were at least 21 other girls in her community on the periphery of the village, and none of them were going to school. What we couldn't understand was why they weren't on our all important list, the list that Mr. Shankar at the school had given us. What did we miss? Where to start? The revelation in Mr. Shankar's village perplexed us as we hadn't just landed up in this village by chance. It wasn't just a list we had stumbled upon. We had followed a process. We had thought, we had been highly strategic about our work plan, about how we were going to find girls who were out of school. Sharing this story takes me right back to when I first returned to India and why we started in Rajasthan. I had started delving into the reports and statistics, and it was clear that there was a big problem in terms of the high number of girls who were out of school. But despite the numbers, even back then, it wasn't a problem everywhere. As I mentioned before, Hans Rosling said, "Go to the margins." But I soon realized I needed to know which margins to go to. Finding girls in a country the size of India, a country of over 1 billion people, felt like trying to find needles in a haystack. A lot of people start an NGO program in their village, but I was very clear from the beginning that this was not going to be my approach. I didn't have a village. There was no my village. I could have stuck a pin on a map, and I'm sure we would have found some out of school girls. But I'm not a gambler. I'm a great one for knowing what I don't know and quite obsessed with data and with process. It's perhaps the economist in me. I needed to work with the people who did know. I wanted to look at the numbers and I wanted to design a system, and what I needed was a meaningful list. Surely the government would have the details of girls who weren't in school. So that was my first port of call. I decided to go and ask the government. I found myself in the offices of the Ministry for Human Resource Development, MHRD, in Shastri Bhavan, New Delhi, a short distance from the Parliament House and India Gate. This was the decision making powerhouse of everything schooling and education in India, and a good friend in Mumbai knew a certain minister personally and had given us a warm introduction. It was a sprawling 7-story building, and as I peered at the signs in the downstairs lobby, I could see that it housed a curious combination of ministries, including law and justice, broadcasting, and petroleum. I had to make sure I found the correct elevator, and I did. There were a few of us perched on white plastic chairs lined up against the wall of the corridor. The minister made short shrift with the trendy television executive who was trying to sell her content to be included in the national curriculum. I had wondered if she was in the wrong ministry. As she launched into a nervous, rehearsed pitch, the minister, standing in his doorway, refused to even invite her into his office. Looking decidedly distracted, he said a firm no before she really got started. Another sales manager of an education company received a similar response. The minister waved him away. "You are far too expensive," he huffed, and the salesman stumbled off down the corridor, typing frantically into his Blackberry. And then there was me. I didn't hold out much hope, having witnessed these two brusque dismissals. I stood in the way of the minister and his lunch. Yet his eyes met with mine, and warmed to a certain degree, I thought. Perhaps I was less out of place in my soft pink salwar kameez rather than the sharp suits of the previous two candidates. "I have a meeting I'm already late for. I literally have 5 minutes," he announced. "Sir," I responded, "I really only need 5." And then he listened and nodded, and I genuinely think he heard me. I told him about our girls, I told him about what I was reading in my research and what I was seeing as I traveled across the country. There were enormous number of girls in rural India who were not going to school. I then asked him to help us build a program for scale. I needed access to schools and a government endorsed plan to take our approach across 40 districts in India, and most importantly I needed to know where to start. "We can help," he agreed far quicker than I had imagined, even although I had run over my 5 minutes. But my ask was simple, my pitch was right. The two ladies who were assisting him turned to me once he had left the room. They then handed over a list, that all important list I was looking for. But it wasn't a list of out of school girls. Instead, it was a list of critical gender gap districts that pointed to Rajasthan as an epicenter with 9 out of the 26 worst districts in the entire country. Of course, education is a state matter. Ms. Hussain, you understand. You will have to go to Rajasthan to take approval there. But the minister's recommendation will go far, one of the ladies insisted in a curt but encouraging tone. And so it began. We had a plan. Going where the gender gap gapes. Okay, so gapes is where there's a wide gulf, so that is where she decided to start. Based on research at the time, we estimated that there were well over 7 million primary aged girls who were missing from India's classrooms and who should have been in school. If we wanted to make sure we weren't going to lose another generation of girls to poverty and illiteracy, we had to act fast and identify where the problem was greatest. Where did a majority of the out of school girls live? I wanted to use the government's gender gap list to help me decipher where to start. The World Economic Forum first published an annual report that looked at the gender gap in 2006 and studied four dimensions: economics, education, health, and politics. It's perhaps no coincidence that when I first started looking for data, this is what we were talking about. And the gender gap in education was quite simply the gap in enrollment numbers between girls and boys in primary school. Essentially, in many areas, there was a 10 to 20% gap between the number of girls and the number of boys going to school. And of course, the number of girls going to school was a lot lower than the number of boys. In 2007, India was divided into around 600 districts, and 26 had what was described as the worst gender gap in education. Of those, a majority of 9 districts were all in Rajasthan. So there I had my first piece of the puzzle. This was where I had to start. I had, with one list, managed to narrow down the problem from everywhere across the country to one state, and from a haystack of 600 districts to what I believed were the 9 worst districts in the country. I might not have found our needles yet, but I'd already cleared out a lot of the hay. Heading the MHRD minister's advice, I went to meet the Rajasthan State Education Minister in Jaipur, and together we decided to officially start in the district of Pali, one of the worst of the 9. These 9 districts on the government's list formed a V shape if you plotted them on a map, and at the center and lowest point sat Pali, somewhat like a pendant hanging on a necklace. If I started in Pali, a kind of hotspot or epicenter, I could then move in both directions, north, east, and northwest, and cover the next 8 districts with ease. This was my thinking. Administrative districts in India are further divided into blocks before you can get down to the village, Gram Panchayat level. So within Pali, the education minister allocated 3 of those areas deemed as development blocks in which to start work that had his valuable approval. These were areas where rain-fed agriculture was the major source of income. But as a drought-prone area, infertile soil and a shortage of water forced large numbers of people to migrate all the way to Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat for 6 to 8 months every year. This focus area also had a population overwhelmingly from what was first described in 1980 as OBC, the population that still makes up 40 to 45% of India's 1.4 billion people. When I first went to Pali, the government told me that a mere 44% of women in the districts were able to read. And in my mind's eye, I could immediately see the other 56%. As I write this now, I can see Jassie's mum, who nearly lost her savings to the bank she thought she could trust, and Poonam, who lost her land to a scheming nephew, all because she couldn't read. This plan was for them. I had, in just a few pivotal meetings, confirmed that Rajasthan was the right state in which to expand this work, the state with a majority of the country's most gender unequal districts. It might, have, it might seem unbelievable, but this is how government meetings go sometimes. Meeting the right person at the right time with the right introduction can work magic. I had been given enormous insight into the districts in which we would start our work. And then the government data even showed me the right blocks in which to start outreach. This was about as strategic as it got, and most importantly, it was a plan backed by the government. But as the gaps in Mr. Shankar's list showed us, neither a list of out of school girls nor a list of gender gap districts was going to be all we needed. Let the count begin. We were in a white Mahindra Commander Jeep and beginning to wonder if it had any functioning suspension at all. Conversation was erratic and our knuckles were white. 12 of us were crowded into the open top vehicle, and two by two we dropped off the teams at the edge of each village where they were to start their school information campaign. Having left the tar road, we were now bumping along a pitted and dusty track, baked hard in the sun. Rajasthan was 8 months away from the last rains, and it was still perhaps a month before the monsoon would break. So the track was sparing no one. The land was hard and thirsty. Despite growing up in Delhi, India's most populous city and the second largest city in the world by population, I'm really a rural girl at heart, by necessity rather than privilege. As a part as a full-time working mum, my mother was unable to care for me when the school doors were shut. Her village friends and relatives were far more likely to be able to accommodate me than neighbors in the city. So I was packed off most holidays. But never was I happier than in these far-flung places. Pilibhit or Clutterbuck Ganj near Bareilly in Uttar Pradesh or Ramnagar near Corbett National Park. So many summers and monsoons were spent in these places. Simple village life had shaped my difficult childhood, despite the fact that I was essentially a city dweller. And I was excited to be going back now on a mission. As you enter any village in India, you are likely to see a school building quite soon. This village was no different, and we pulled up to the low boundary wall. Peering over, we could see the children straight backed and seated in rows on striped rugs laid out on a polished veranda that ran the length of the building. A couple of steep steps above the dusty playground, almost like the stage. Others spilled out from the classrooms, making the most of the natural light rather than relying on the small bare light bulbs that dangled and swayed with the breath from the fan that nonchalantly moved the hot air around. Today the fan fanned and the light was lit. But on the other days, when there was a power cut, the classrooms were airless and dark. I popped my head around the door, and children's eyes stared up at me. Some eyes were apprehensive, others cheeky and curious. The head teacher took me aside after the class, and we sat on two white plastic chairs at one end of the veranda. Chairs that were these days as common in offices in Delhi as they were in the most remote village. One of the children's mothers who cooked the midday meal approached, carrying a steel tray with the anticipated yet welcome cup of chai. We had come to this village to start building our village profile. The Principal Secretary of Education had allocated 50 schools in these three development blocks, and this was where we were starting our very first program, 25 in Pali and 25 in the neighboring Jalore district. The job at hand now was to understand the current status of the schools and of the girls. We were going to record details about the school size, teachers, availability of learning materials, and midday meals. We would list the state of the infrastructure. Did it have electricity, running water, or a playground? Was there a functioning toilet and a separate one for girls? How were the children's grades? But most importantly, we were going to look at the enrollment numbers. And as we sat there with the head teacher, the first thing she did was hand us a list before we had even asked. This felt easy. She opened up a slightly scruffy looking A4 exercise book with a marbled cover and pale green lined pages. And as she ran her finger down the page, she explained that to the best of her knowledge, this list accounted for the girls in the village who had either dropped out or never been enrolled. These were the lists that we used for the first year or so as we slowly made our way around the first few blocks in Pali and Jalore. We had lists, we enrolled girls. We certainly thought that the system was working. Think we'll stop here today?
Yeah, uh, I have bookmarked the page for everyone's reference. So
Okay,
I'll
thank
be
you.
posting this in the groups for everyone to understand. So what I've gathered from this chapter personally is it really hurts a lot when you have some plan and it doesn't work over time.
Absolutely.
So, and then again, you have to restart and start moving from one place to another, gathering stone, collecting data, meeting people. So, yes, that is your enthusiasm, and it is what about it's all about your passion and enthusiasm that you're doing all these things. But what really matters is like if everyone helps you at that particular time, so that it should be properly done, and many times it doesn't happen. So how do you feel when one of your big project or something has you wanted it to be successful and it didn't happen at the first go?
Yes, it's always a very, it's a challenge when we have some project in mind, especially in a country like India, ma'am, where we have, billions of people, and especially to get that particular connection is very important, because as we saw in this case also, to have a minister's recommendation or to know the right people is very very essential, especially when we are trying to start a project on this scale that Safina ji was trying to. uh, Unless and until you have the government backing, the right people, and they give you the right recommendations and approvals, it is really very difficult to get this to start any project, no matter how good your intentions are. So like she said, like it was like looking for needles in a haystack. So just to be able to pinpoint the area and to know and to get that kind of correct data, that is very very important in a project. So sometimes we all have very good intentions, but because we don't probably get the right help at the right time, as you rightly said, ma'am, uh, projects can fail very miserably. And that really hurts a lot, because when you put in a lot of dedication and passion into something, then when that does not materialize in spite of your best efforts, then it really can be a great setback. But probably the idea is not to give up and to keep on persisting and to believe in the dream. And like we saw in Safina ji's case also, that her persistence probably made her dreams come true. So
Yeah, certainly, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your belief. And Pushpendra, do you want to add something to this?
No, ma'am, not.
Okay. So I believe then we don't have anything more to be added. So for this, I really would like to thank ma'am for having to be with us and having a very wonderful book reading. Pushpita ma'am, thank you so much. Let's hope
thank you,
and meet
Manisha ma'am.
next week also to
Yes, ma'am.
share our ideas, to understand. the book,
Absolutely,
the
ma'am.
chapters, and what is going around in a better way. Thank you everyone for joining. Let's meet the next week. Thank you. Bye bye. Tata.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks a lot.